Hello, everybody. Welcome back to CD Office Hours. This is our final show of the year, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about agentic AI in software delivery. And I'm going to pass it straight over to Bob to kick us off.
Well, thank you, Tony. So, Steve and Tony, I got a scenario for you. All right, so agentic AI. In a nutshell, we have AI agents calling other AI agents. It could be calling an MCP server. It could be using the A to A protocol that was created by Google. But essentially, it's going to be making decisions for you. Now, and traditionally, hey, I'm writing some code, open up an issue. That's typically not that big of a deal. Well, what about when it comes to, say, software delivery in your CI/CD pipeline? What are your thoughts and what concerns do you have about having AI agents, say, call out to Octopus Deploy to do any number of different actions? It could be create a new project for me, update some variables for me, deploy this for me, roll this back for me. What are your thoughts on something like that? Are there any concerns, any risks, anything along those lines? Because it stems from a conversation I had recently, um, and I have some thoughts, but I'd be curious to get your thoughts first.
Yeah, this is super interesting. So I'm probably going to offend a whole bunch of people when I say that this idea of kind of using MCP to do these tasks is a little bit like Alexa, but better, right? You know, when
Yep.
you were like, you could say things to Alexa, get it to do things, right? So you can just give it an instruction. And if it works out what you're trying to say, it'll go and do it. And
Yeah.
most of the time, that's quite low risk because you're saying, can you play my favorite playlist? And sometimes it will pick the wrong playlist and it's no big deal. And so I suppose it comes down to if you wouldn't take the person that joined the organization this week and give them the instruction and let them go and do it, then I would be quite skeptical about giving that to an agent to do because I kind of feel that they're as likely to make a mistake as someone who's just joined the organization.
Yeah, that's kind of where my initial thought was as well, is it's that non-determinism as to what it's going to decide upon. Uh, and you have really no control over any of that. But back to your point, it's no different than a person who just joined your organization. They're non-deterministic as well. Now, that being said, that person that joined the organization will learn and grow and become experts eventually. And you could also make the argument that hopefully the AI agents and the large language models would learn and grow and start understanding some of those things, start establishing some of those relationships and everything along those lines. But I guess when it comes down to it, it's how much trust do you put into this particular thing? I think that's really, at the end of the day, it's really sliding scales of trust if you think about it. In your point of view, you're treating the AI agent almost like it's a brand new junior engineer or brand new intern who you have almost no trust because you don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what knobs or levers they're going to pull that's going to cause production to go down.
I think there's a pattern for this though from was it David Marquette who wrote Turn the Ship Around?
Hmm.
So he was a commander of a nuclear submarine and he was trying to find the right pattern for running. It was the worst submarine in the fleet, and he transformed it to being the best submarine in the fleet. And one of the techniques he used is called intent-based leadership. So instead of the captain having to kind of order everyone to do things, the idea was that the crew could state what they were going to do out loud
Mm-hmm.
so people knew what they were about to do. And then people could question that if it didn't sound like the right thing to do. And we've seen this. Matt Casperson did this when he first created the AI agent. It would tell you what it was about to do. So if you said to
Yep.
it, "Can you go and do this thing?" it would come back and say, "Oh, I found a space called microsites, and I found a project called blog. I will now deploy the latest version, which is 3.2.1." And that gives you an opportunity to say, "Whoa, no, that's not what I meant. You've got the wrong end of the stick." And correct it rather than it just happening. And I think that's probably a pattern that works with agents like it did
Yep.
on this nuclear submarine. And that was obviously in terms of like there being risk and being worried about whether you can trust people to do stuff or trust a AI agent to do stuff, that feels like a good model.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I think it kind of comes back to a little bit what you said was you almost want to treat your AI agent like a person. And again, I'm going to treat it like an engine. I'm going to treat it like the most junior engineer we have or an intern because I have low trust in that particular case. And I'm going to ask it to confirm, or tell me what it's about to do, that intent-based thing. And I think when you start treating it like that, it also definitely helps out because you can then think through different, I guess, almost different personas at that point in time. Because eventually that junior engineer will become a seasoned engineer, and you'll want to give them a little bit more responsibility. Yes, you still want to do a bit more intent based, like, hey, I still want you to tell me what you're going to do because the difference between an AI agent and a junior engineer, this person, is the AI agent can do it a lot faster, and create chaos a lot much quicker. But at the end of the day, you will start trusting them a little bit more because uh, you've put the appropriate guardrails in place. You found where all of the rough spots were. Uh, to the point of like, if you go back to, hey, tell me what you're about to do. If it's always picking the wrong release to deploy, chances are is like, okay, I need to change my instructions. I need to change this. I need to do something to increase the likelihood that they are going to pick the right release to deploy to the right environment at the right time. Like you're going to start learning on how to do that. Same thing like if you're training a new junior engineer, like, okay, what in my instructions that I gave you face to face or over email that was ambiguous, that was unclear? Okay, what do I have to do to change that? And then not only that, but what guardrails do I need to put in place because maybe you picked the wrong project? Well, I'm not going to give you the rights to deploy that project, for example. And so then you start increasing that trust and you say, okay, now instead of just doing deployments to say dev and test, and that's all you can do, now I'm going to let you deploy all the way up to production, but I'm going to require an ITSM approval. And you have to, it's going to call out automatically to ServiceNow. That's not even a debate. This Octopus Deploy will do that, not the AI agent, not the MCP server, but Octopus Deploy will call out to ServiceNow and create the change request for you and wait. And you have to do this particular action. And that's fine because that's a guardrail that we've put in place. So I think it's also just learning about you know, what those junior engineers or your AI agents that you treat like junior engineers in terms of trust, what they can do, and then trying to expand it out. So really, again, it's expanding that scope of trust as you get more comfortable with what they can do and as you learn on how to interact with them better.
Yeah, I suppose I'm probably slightly cautious on treating AI like a person or like a human.
Oh no,
I had
100%.
I had a
Yeah,
cold
I agree.
approach on LinkedIn where they said, "Hey, meet your new senior developer. We have an AI tool that does code review." And
Yeah,
I went back and said, "Well, I kind of don't really like the idea of making AI like a person. So,
yeah,
do you have a different pitch that just tells me what the tool does?" So I can like look at it that way. And they sent me a video, and it was like all about how this tool was a person. They didn't
yeah.
seem to get the disconnect. So yeah, I think I'm cautious in how we label it. I think it's more that I wouldn't trust it more than the junior developer. It
No,
would make sense not to trust it more rather than me treating it like a junior developer, if that makes
yes.
sense.
It's in my mind, it's sliding scales of trust of how much do you want to trust the thing? How much do you
Yeah,
trust either the person or the AI agent? I think that's the most important distinction, not to treat it like a person, but in your brain go, I don't trust it any more than this
yeah,
particular individual or this particular role. And
that's
you
right. And
also,
I think you can add other things onto that scale as well.
yeah,
Like imagine you've got this kind of line going up and down, and you kind of put a junior developer on there, and maybe you put an AI agent on there somewhere, and then you might pick an Octopus and say, well, how much do I trust Octopus to do things? And you're like, well, it's highly repeatable and automated, so actually I trust that probably more than I would trust a human to do deployments because
yeah,
it won't miss a step or do a step differently or miss that flag that's super important on that command that gets run, those kinds of things.
yeah.
So it's like, I suppose you're looking at trusting it to do a specific thing and assessing it against other ways of doing that thing as well. Hmm.
And it's, yeah, and It's also about the fact that it's really a non-deterministic interaction with a deterministic tool. And I think that's critically important to understand when it comes to software delivery, because you want your software delivery pipeline to be deterministic. If I send the exact same inputs in, I should get the exact same inputs out. There should be no ambiguity as to what, if, what, when, or where. But basically the AI agents kind of sit around that deterministic tool. So you have the non-deterministic interaction, and that's where you need that sliding scales of trust on something along those lines. But this is also allows you to put the appropriate guardrails in place, and I think this is why, again, when you start thinking, when I think about it like a person, where I treat it like how do I trust this particular person? I start thinking like, well, what about like say RBAC controls? I'm going to allow the AI agent, because I don't trust them as much, to have limited access to maybe these 5 projects within Octopus. Same thing with the junior engineer. I don't really trust them, so I'm going to give them access to those 5 projects. Well, I don't trust it to deploy to production, so I'm going to limit it to only be able to deploy to dev and test, like the AI agent. Same thing with the junior engineer. But that's
Yeah.
kind of that's all configured within RBAC, and then we started expanding that out further and further. So you have the ITSM integration. Again, that's configured within Octopus. That's not something that the AI agents are configuring or the junior engineer is configuring. And then you can expand it even further into, say, Platform Hub. And that's really where you get into a lot of these really great guardrails we're adding into place. It's like, hey, great, we want to let the AI agent create projects, but we're only going to allow it to create a project. Same thing with a junior engineer, because we don't trust them, or even a more seasoned engineer, we have a limited scope of trust. We're only going to allow them to create projects from this project template or these project templates that we're going to give them access to. When they do a deployment, we're going to run the policies and we're going to verify that you are running this particular step. It's not skipped. That the artifact that I'm deploying is coming from main. We have a policy for that now, and making sure that you can't do these types of things. And if it does violate this, then Octopus Deploy blocks it, not the AI agent, not the junior engineer. It's Octopus Deploy with the policies that we have in place that
Yeah.
allows you to do that. So it's the tool itself that's going to put the guardrails to prevent basically this any sort of non-deterministic interaction, be it from a person or from an AI agent, to do the wrong thing.
That's absolutely crucial. This is like probably like the key point is you don't give the agent context to limit it. You don't say to it, don't ever do a deployment to production and don't touch these projects, which a lot of people have tried, right? They've tried this with
Correct.
things like don't touch my tests, and don't write to anywhere on my file system apart from this project folder. And occasionally it kind of breaks out and accidentally does something that actually it was supposed to not do. So don't depend on like supplying context to your agent to limit it. Use role-based access control, use policies in your deployment tool, like use those kind of things that actually properly lock it down instead of giving it a list of instructions of what it shouldn't do. I think that's super important.
Yeah. And then at the end of the day, it's how you do this, with a junior developer, with an AI agent, be it, and not only that, but like MCP or agent to agent or any of those protocols. That's really up to you to define of how you want to do that. But ultimately, like to your point, it's in the tool, it's the layer below the AI agent, the MCP server, the person that has that configuration, that has those guardrails in place.
I think part of how I look at AI is, and I think some of the lot to your point, Bob, around the risk. It's almost like you need to assume that AI will be bullish and confident about what it's going to do. Like, and if you don't have that control, it probably will just run wild. I can't tell you the amount of times you put something in and you get a response out of it, whatever LLM. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting piece of data or an interesting quote. And could you tell me where you got it? And it's like, oh, no, I just made it up. And you're like, why would you do that? So
Yeah.
if there's the interesting or the funny analogy that I saw, I can't remember, it was on Twitter or LinkedIn. Somebody said, "Hey, I've took a picture of these berries on a bush, and it's like put it into AI. Are these safe to eat?" It's like, "Oh yeah, they're delicious. Go ahead." And 10 minutes later, I'm not feeling too good. You go back to
Yeah.
the AI. What happened to those berries? And they're like, "Oh yeah, they're actually really poisonous." My bad. So there's without that, I like how you explain the concept of Octopus as that control. It's kind of like tolerance to risk, but also putting a cap on this thing can't run wild and make those
Yeah.
decisions. It's like I'm going to guide it, and where I want it to make a decision, cool, but don't go outside those boundaries.
To Steve's point, when you try to do it within the context itself, um, if you don't control the actual interactions, you're essentially giving the agent, or it's the equivalent of giving a developer whom you may or may not trust, God mode or sysadmin
Yeah,
rights.
yeah,
And
for
would you
Yeah.
sure.
like in what world would you ever want to do something like that? So I think it's a lot of these things that you hear about where, oh, it accidentally deleted production or it, you know, rewrote all of my tests or deleted all my tests. Why did I have permission to do that in the first place? I guess is the biggest question that I have. Like why not why did you not limit it by context, but underneath all of that, that interaction? I mean, that's no different to me than if we keep coming back to it, than giving the intern sysadmin rights. Like what could possibly go wrong? Everything. Everything could possibly go wrong, you know?
I'm picturing one of the video series that we have recently released over the last. I'm picturing another skit of the new junior coming in, and he represents AI, and 10 minutes in, he's just go do it, and everything's going on fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose
Yeah.
the perfect example is if you tell a child, do not look inside this box, and then you leave the room.
Yeah.
The only idea they have in their head as soon as you leave the room is they want to know what's in that box.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to accidentally, by telling AI not to do something, you're giving it a lot of keywords about things that it's then going to want to do. So if you say, under no circumstances, delete the database, it's kind of got this phrase in there now, delete the database, that
Yeah.
could pop up in an unexpected way, that was the famous example that we were all following on social media, right? There was someone was vibe coding this application and they explicitly said very carefully, do not delete the database, do not change the database without telling me. And of course, it completely changed the database, lost all the data, changed all the code, and they were like, "Oh, I wish I could get back to the code I had before that last attempt." And you're like, "Okay, it's 2025, and you've just discovered version control."
Yeah.
Um, and database backups. That's two of
Yeah.
the things that we have on our little checklist of things that you should have before you start delivering software.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it comes back to scales of trust. You know, would you trust the child in the room with it? Like, why would you trust a child in a room with a box that doesn't lock?
Yeah.
It's like that's almost on. It's like the analogy that because I live in Nebraska is like I want to get into the bull ring and run around and slap the bull. It's like I can't be upset that the bull gouged me or mauled me because I mean I was in there in the first place. I was dumb enough to get in there in the first place. Like that was on me as an adult. And to the point of, you give the AI agent the permissions to be able to do this. Because again, at the end of the day, when you look at, say, I'm going to use our MCP server as an example. At the end of the day, our MCP server is a wrapper around our API with particular commands that you can run. At the end of the day, I gave it the permissions to do the thing. That was on me. That's how I configured it. I was the one who gave it my API key, not a service account's API key who I limited access to do certain things. So
Yeah, and
again, it
that's an
comes back
interesting
to proper
one.
configuration.
Like, I wonder if one of the things we're going to see appearing in 2026 and beyond will be the concept of a service account which has an allocated team who take care of that service account.
Hmm.
So maybe when that service account wants to do something, there's a group of people who are there to approve it before it happens. I wonder if that's going to become a concept because at the moment, service accounts were created in the age of determinism, and you would add that
Yeah.
service account, allow it to call a particular API, and it would do its thing, and it would be the same every time. But now that we have agents using these service accounts, maybe there's a need for us to have like who's in charge of looking after this agent, and if it wants to do something, they check what it's going to do. And it might be that you let it read whatever it wants to read, but if it wants to do right operations, that a human is brought into that loop to double check before it happens. Same as when we do our database upgrades, and we might have a tool that generates the Delta script, and then a DBA checks that before we actually run that against our production database.
Yeah. I I do wonder about that, but I also wonder if there's another way to solve that as opposed to like the service accounts particularly. I want to go back to our platform hub as an example. We have the process templates, we're going to have project templates, we have policies in place. And those are all the things that basically prevent you from even doing the wrong thing or pulling on the wrong thing. So it's kind of not necessarily you have to have a person look after it. It's almost like another computer is watching it, the AI agent, one that is deterministic that we can say this is always going to happen this particular way. So it's a bit more automated in that fashion. But to your point, there might be some risky activities, and this is true for anything. Like when we upgrade the database, if you saw the command in the Delta script that said drop database, you probably want to have a DBA take a look at that. You probably want to have someone else take a look at that, but that's going to be more of not necessarily one-offs, but that will be more of a exceptions to allow the DBA to focus on more higher value reviews rather than I have to review everything. Because I
Yeah.
suspect what will happen is we're going to do a lot more deployments next year. And so the question will be how can we filter out the noise and elevate the higher signals?
That should probably be something we bring to the betting table. With AI, will we do more deployments, or will we end up doing the same number of deployments, but they have twice as much change per deployment? That'll be an
Yeah,
interesting one to
Start to
work out where we
discuss.
land on that one. If we're
It
doing it
is.
right, there should be more deployments. All right.
Yeah.
The Dora reports kind of said this. Look, actually, small batches are even more important now that we're using these tools.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see if your deployment frequency isn't increasing, it means that you're increasing your batch size and you'll probably start amplifying bad things.
This is where the plan will enter the chat as well because just because you increase your throughput by 10x, does that increase your profit by 10x? So
Well, yeah, I'm a big fan of one of the great things about being constrained in how much software you can deliver is that you have to think about whether a feature should be in your product or not.
yeah, 100%.
Um, and if you're not constrained, because you can say you had infinite capacity, you could be tempted to just put every feature that's requested in, but then your software is not a delightful experience for people, and actually it becomes very confused because it's doesn't have a strong enough opinion baked into it to take you in the right direction.
Hey, it comes back to
Yeah.
and when we size work internally, we call it sand, pebble, rocks, boulders. And if you think about it like, hey, I have to fill this jar at a beach with sand, pebbles, and rocks. Boulders are like kind of off to the side, but the jar is only so big. I mean, at any point in time, every company on this planet, they have a jar that's a set size. Now you can hire more developers to increase the jar, but you still have a jar. And that jar will always be smaller than the beach. So it's really critical to determine, and I think that's the most important thing is knowing what to build is going to become even more critical. And honestly, that's always been the problem. I think writing code I mean, we've, for lack of a better term, it's kind of been a solved problem. Writing code has always been honestly probably the easier part of the day. It's knowing what to write, what to fix, what to change. It's the hardest part.
Yeah, I think like we reached a point where the tools that we had around writing code actually meant it actually doesn't take that long to write
Yeah,
some code. I've had experience working on features, and it was our cycle time was 3 hours. So we'd sit down with
yeah.
um, a clinical product owner, and they would describe what they needed, and then 3 hours later we were demoing that version to see if it was matching their expectations. So typing speed is definitely not the problem to be solved. Um, but like choosing good things to build is still going to be the differentiation between high quality software and low quality software. And that, again, that's come from the research, that user centricity. They found that teams who technically might be labeled uh, like lower throughput
Yeah.
were beating high throughput teams because the features were well aligned to what users needed.
Mhm.
So I recently reread No Silver Bullet, which was written by Frederick Brooks, who wrote the Mythical Man Month, and I posted a quote in our internal Slack, and I'll read it to you. And this was written in 1986, and so I think it's still applicable today, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. The hardest single part of building a software system is deciding precisely what to build. No other part of the conceptual work is so difficult as establishing the detailed technical requirements, including all the interfaces to people, to machines, and to other software systems. No other part of the work so cripples the resulting system if done wrong.
Applies to so
It's
much
still
more.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's like I anyone that listens to me talk about marketing, I'd be like 50% of the things are going to fail out the gate. It's just how it works. It's
Yeah.
like we coming up with the best idea and executing on it really well is still the problem to solve. Like doing 100 things isn't the answer. It's
Yeah.
like so
Are
Yeah.
you
it's
doing the right thing? Yeah. So,
yeah, yeah.
all right.
It's
I'm
I like
I'm
Fred Brooks. He was right even when he was wrong. So
yeah.
he did a second edition of the Mythical Man Month. And he changed some of the stuff he said around documentation because he felt it had been invalidated by the invention of microfiche.
Yeah.
Right. So there's this chapter which talks quite a lot about using microfiche. But the funny thing is, when we started getting deeper into research, especially over the last decade, um, people like me who had laughed about this chapter on microfiche then discovered that developer documentation has this huge moderating effect on all of your software delivery outcomes. So even though he was talking about microfiche, what he was really talking about is having really good, high quality documentation that you could easily get hold of. And
Yeah.
that part of it's kind of still true as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
makes
the
me look like an idiot.
for a lot of the Mythical Man Month when you read it, it's the what is much more important than the how. And he spends a lot, he's typically will spend equal amount of time talking about both the how and the what. And you can kind of almost ignore the how. Oh, microfiche. I remember I read the first edition when he was talking about these massive binders that everyone, anyway, neither here nor there. But the point is having high quality documentation. That's the what. That's the most critical thing, not the how, not the other pieces of the, not how you do the thing. So anyway, I have a hard stop. Actually, I'm a little over my hard stop, so I have to cut it.
yeah. All good. Thank you, folks. And for anyone listening in, have a good, safe holidays and good,
Yeah.
relaxing time off. And we will see you in 2026.
Have a
See
good
you in
one, everyone.
Talk soon.
2026.
Bye.
Bye bye.